Hey everybody, this is Dom. We're going to be watching one of our round 3 matches from the double Ravnica rotisserie draft. This is Michael Smith. He's 2-0 with Azorius, and he's going to be playing against Scott, who's 1-1 with Abzan tokens. And it looks like Smith has won the die roll, so he has 3 lands, 2 of them are bounce lands, and then he has Azorius Arrestor, Peel from Reality, Pride of the Clouds, and Skymark Rocks. I think this hand is okay. The double bounce hand's a little bit weird, but he can probably work around it. He's going to have to play 1 on turn 2 and 1 on turn 4. Looks like a reasonable hand for Scott. He has turn 2 Voice of Resurgence, which is usually pretty good. He's got a Golgari Rat Farm. Germination, I don't think we've seen in his matches yet, so this is going to make a 1-1 whenever a non-token dies. So it's pretty resilient against removal, although not necessarily against the kind of removal Smith is playing. Smith picks up Court Hussar. It's a fine 3-drop, and he can cast that next turn, smooths out your draws pretty nicely. And here, Pillar of the Parians actually casts every spell in his hand. So it looks like we're going to have a game where... I just realized my volume was very low. Sorry about that. Both players can cast spells, which is good because we haven't had a ton of those in our league so far. Alright, Smith replays his planes. I assume he's going to cast Court Hussar here. I guess he could cast Arrestor, but it seems like a less efficient use of his mana. Next turn, he's going to want to play the other bounce land. So this is... Oh, he drew Azorius Guildmage for the turn, so he actually cast that. Or no, he tapped 3 mana. I wonder if he accidentally played the wrong card. I guess we'll find out. Oh no, he can't use the green mana off the Growth Chamber to cast it. That's what he did. My bad. Okay. Alright, so Smith has... Scott has really only one option, and that's to cast Golgari Germination here, because he has no targets for Beck and Apparition, and he doesn't have enough mana to cast the Advent of the Worm. So this Voice of Resurgence dies. It's going to make an Elemental and a 1-1. So again, this is a pretty resilient strategy against removal, but Smith's playing a tempo deck. He has a bunch of bounce and detain spells, so not actually sure how good this card's going to be. Smith picks up an island here. He could actually cast Skymark Rock here and bounce the Voice of Resurgence, which seems like a pretty strong tempo play. That is what his deck is built around. I remember this card being very good in Return to Ravnica draft, which I played a bit more than most draft formats. So he does play the island. He could play 2/2 drops, but yeah, he's going to play the Skymark Rock. So that's going to return Voice to Scott's hand, and this is what Smith's deck does well. The Voice did not get bounced. Oh, it's when it attacks. That's my bad. Okay. So it's not quite that good. It's not Mist Raven. Oh, actually, this draw of Unflinching Courage could make Voice of Resurgence large enough to get around the Skymark Rock, but it also makes it vulnerable to Peel from Reality next turn. Although Bounce Spell is also good against Advent of the Worm. So we have an interesting back and forth going on here. And what is Scott going to want to do? Alright, in comes Voice of Resurgence. This is a complete bluff attack. He doesn't have any tricks. Like, if the Skymark Rock blocks, he's just gonna, I guess, be content to make 2 tokens. Smith takes the 2 damage. A no play from Scott here has to pretty clearly signal Advent of the Worm, which could potentially ambush the Azorius Guildmage if it attacks, but we know that there is Appeal from Reality. Smith draws Azorius Chancery, so his 3rd bounce land. He does have 4. And he declares attacks. Now I believe Skymark Rock is going to trigger. Voice of Resurgence goes back to the hand. And now I assume we're going to see Scott takes 5 damage. Okay. Smith casts Court Hussar. This is going to let him look at the top 3 cards, put 1 in his hand and the rest on the bottom. So it's a pretty solid card. It's kind of like Seagate Oracle from Rise of the Eldrazi, if anybody remembers that one. I'm actually not joined by Hunter Garrett. I'm on my own on the commentary today. I should probably fix that. And Smith is right where he wants to be. He's got 3 creatures to his opponent's none. Alright, so it looks like Smith took Detention Sphere over Lavinia of the 10th and Grand Arbiter Augustin the 4th. So he values that removal. Again, another removal spell that's not going to trigger Golgari Termination. This card seems not super well positioned in this matchup. He probably will still... Scott can still cast the Advent. So Smith plays the Azorius Chancery, bouncing the island. And I believe we're now finally in the end step. Here comes Advent of the Worm. We'll probably get 1 attack in, but not much more. It would be really rough if Scott goes for the Unflinching Courage on it. Then he's really could get 2 for... Really 2 for Ode almost, because this Peel from Reality is probably going to bounce the Court Hussar to get another card. So draw for turn is Growing Ranks, which Scott may be tempted to play here because it looks like it's going to be good. Look, I'm going to make all these 5/5s with trample. But obviously it is going to give Scott a turn to deal with it, and we know he has multiple ways to do that. He also could use the Detention Sphere just to get rid of the Growing Ranks, although that doesn't really seem necessary. Scott's in the tank here. He can cast Beckon Apparition along with the Growing Ranks. So he may try to go that route. Certainly much more efficient use of mana. I guess he could play Unflinching Courage and Voice. But like I said, don't really want to go all in on this worm that's going to be public enemy number 1 anyway. Scott doesn't attack, so he's concerned about his life total. There's an Angel of Serenity. He's actually pretty close to casting that. Yeah, I think that Scott's draw just lined up very poorly. Smith's just eking out all this advantage. It seems like every turn he's just pulling a little bit further ahead. He's going to peel the worm and probably recast the Court Hussar. That seems pretty good. I was going to say it's going to ensure he can cast a 7-drop, but he actually already has the Selesnya Sanctuary and this island. So I think this game is going to be over fairly soon. So Scott is going to go for the Beckon Apparition. Growing Ranks should allow him to populate. Oh no, he's just going to Shunt Block, I guess. Because otherwise he'd just wait for the end step. He does get to exile Appeal from Reality for very, very marginal value, if any. Alright, we've got a nice, look at that Spirit Token. Actually sort of a disturbing artwork. I'm not sure what set that's from. Might be a dual deck or something. I assume... No, he made it during combat but then didn't block. So yeah, I think he wants another one. The big problem is that Skymark Rock's just going to keep bouncing him. Card's actually pretty punishing when not answered. Smith's gonna, I think... Oh. He actually intended to cast the D-Sphere. He steals the Growing Ranks. And plays the Sanctuary. I think he meant to play the land and not the Azorius Arrestor that he momentarily put on the table. This guy picks up a land that he doesn't really need. He might just have to Unflinching Encourage a Spirit Token and hope. But we know about there's the Azorius Arrestor and the Angel of Serenity. So Scott really can't do anything noteworthy that I can come up with here. Looks like Scott's going to reach the line. Well, he's tapped his 3 mana. He hasn't actually cast it yet. Can definitely relate to this feeling when you're so far behind and kind of pinned on options. Just want to make sure you're not missing something. There we go. Unflinching Courage. But he really has no good options. If he attacks, he's still not going to be able to race because of the detain. And if he doesn't attack, the Azorius Guildmage can tap it. So really just, you could say, caught between a rock and a hard place. Sorry. I enjoy the taste of low-hanging fruit. Alright, he's going to attack, it looks like. Well, he tapped his Unflinching Courage. I assume that means he's attacking. Smith has numerous ways he could win here. My guess is he might just cast the Angel because he hasn't got to cast it yet in the league. But I think the correct play is probably just to detain it and then cast the Cortisar. Or I guess you cast the Cortisar first and see what you draw off of it. So, Cortisar is back, all the value. He finds Aetherling in case he needed more game enders. Planes or 2 planes get shipped to the bottom. So this is going to be an attack for 5. I guess he could either cast the Arrestor, which he's going to do, or leave up the tap ability on the Guildmage, but developing the board makes sense. He's not really worried about sweepers. Spirit Token gets detained. This is going to be an attack for 5. Scott drops to 8. Sorry, I'm distracted by this Islanders-Rangers game, which has been pretty good. 1-1 in the 3rd period. I feel like the slow pace of this game is allowing me to to look up at the hockey game and not miss very much. So after some contemplation, Scott's had enough. I'm not sure Smith hadn't actually played anything, but Scott's just done. Doesn't want to play anymore, which seems pretty reasonable. And we knew it was in the hands. There was basically no way he was going to win. So we will take a quick look at some backlists. Michael Smith playing Azorius Tempo. I'm not actually sure what he... Go away, Norton. Sideboard. Dryad Militant. Daring Skyjack. He could get aggressive. Minister of Impediments might be good, although probably not against tokens. I'm not actually sure what he wants, if anything. Renounce the Guilds might be good. Scott has a lot of multicolored cards. And Repeal is great against tokens. So he'll probably bring in Repeal, maybe Renounce the Guilds. I don't think he needs to change his deck too much, though. Here's Scott. It's an Abzan list. He's going to need a way to like stick some guys in play and be less vulnerable to bounce, which is tough to do in a token deck since tokens, both, they're pretty vulnerable to bounce. A lot of these cards, like Rootborn Defenses, doesn't do a lot. Leyline of Life Force. These cards aren't really solving the problems that he's facing. I just realized I missed an O and locks it on Hierarch. He may just want to bring in the efficient creatures like the Smiter. But yeah, we'll have to ask him in the interview after the game what he does, because I'm not entirely sure. I think I have a standings graphic. Although it's a little bit out of date, so I beat Hunter, so I'm 1 and 2, he's 2 and 1 now. And then I believe Yuki beat Harry. So Yuki's 2 and 1, Hunter's 2 and 1. So actually if Smith loses this game, it'll be a 3-way tie for first, but if he wins, he'll be alone in first. And I'll remind you that we're playing 7 rounds of round robin, and the top 4 players are going to advance. And being the number 1 seed is a pretty big deal. You get to actually choose your opponent in the semifinals, which is pretty good. You can either ensure the easiest matchup for you and or put your worst matchup in their worst matchup, and hope to not face them in the finals. So that's a pretty powerful thing, being able to actually set up the bracket. Looks like we're going to be ready here for game 2. Look at the starting hands. These look fine. Smith has that Repeal. It's pretty big deal. He's got 2 lands, but they make 3 mana. Scott, he has the Leyline of the Meek, which will just be a turn 0 Anthem effect. That's pretty cool. And he has all his colors as well. He doesn't have a relevant play until turn 4, though, so he is going to need to draw. He'd really like to draw something like Call of the Conclave that will allow him to populate. It'll be interesting to see what Leyline of the Meek does for him. It seemed like his problem was threat density more so than threat quality in the first game. So Leyline of the Meek doesn't really help too much with that, although I guess it makes your 1/1s into more potent threats. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out in this game. Scott decides to mulligan, and this hand looks worse. He brought in Glare of Subdual, which I think makes sense. He's probably going to 5, though. I don't see much this hand can do. All right, we found Leyline again. So he's got Leyline, 3 lands on here. I think you have to keep that on 5. Turn 0. I think this is the first turn 0 play of our rotisserie drafts. Scott finds Voice of Resurgence with the Scry. That's actually pretty good. Fortunately, no targets for Sundering Growth. at the moment, but Smith definitely has some enchantment removal. He'll probably find one at some point in the game. It is awkward getting your Leyline Cyclonic Rifted, and you actually have to pay 4 mana for this effect that's not necessarily worth 4 mana. There's a Detention Sphere for this, to get hit by the Sundering Grave. Potentially. Scott is going to have the Voice of Resurgence turn 2. It's at least a good opening, and Smith is going to be on a bounce land, so if there's Azorius Dresser, Smith is going to have to discard. Hopefully. I think he messed this up in an earlier match, actually. Alright, there goes Syncopate. Yeah, he's probably not going to be able to hold up Syncopate. He has a bunch of 2 and 3 mana plays. It's kind of nice to have along with the Repeal. Like, his counter spells get better when you have a different instant you can play. But I don't really think that's going to be his game plan here. He's probably going to want to go Detain the Voice. So Scott drew a Plains and elected to play it over the coming to play tap land, which I don't really understand because he doesn't have a 3-drop. Now, if he draws a 4-drop next turn, he won't be able to cast it. So I think that's a sequencing error. Although I admit I was watching hockey during his draw step, so... Alright, here comes Lie of Sky Knight. That's even better than the Arrestor. Obviously going to Detain the Voice. Guess he could Detain the Leyline of the Meek, but that doesn't seem very productive. Something I didn't realize at first, and that actually was, I thought, pretty elegant in the design, was that all the multicolored Detain cards detain non-land permanents, but all the single-colored Detain cards only detain creatures. So like Azorius Arrestor only can detain a creature, but the Sky Knight can detain any non-land permanent. So I always thought that was kind of cool. And Scott does, in fact, draw a 4-mana spell he would probably like to cast this turn, so that did not end too well for him. And Glare of Subdual would actually be a way to use the Voice this turn to not take 3 damage. So yeah, I think that land play has hurt him a bit here. At least going to cost him 3 life. Still tied, 10 minutes to go. Yeah, so no plays here for Scott. Smith's going to play his 4th mana, cast New Prov Guildmage. Another Detainer. And then Lie of Sky Knight will get in for 3. Grove of the Guardian is the draw. That's actually pretty good. So, well, it's not that good. Because he needs a creature. Because you need 5 other lands, and he only has 4 other lands, and you need 2 creatures, he only has 1 other creature. So I don't think, anyway, he's going to be able to activate it next turn. He is going to get to cast Glare of Subdual. This I had ranked as one of my... This didn't go till pretty late in the draft, but I actually had this as one of my top 10 cards. It's very powerful. In a token-based deck, you can really lock down what your opponent's doing. Don't think Voice of Resurgence, yeah. Super likely to attack here. So Smith draws a Plains, so he now has 5 mana. He could detain the Voice and attack, but I think, yeah, it's better just to use the Arrestor to detain. Oh, again, he can still tap. Because he has Glare of Subdual. So I think he's only going to take 2 damage here. We could, I think, see Detention Sphere on the Glare. Which, if that happens, would be felt by Sundering Growth, but it wouldn't get a Populate. So that's probably a disappointment. I know that... Oh, we didn't... Yeah, he had enough mana. So he just didn't do it. Twilight Drover. It's not too great here. So it's fodder for the Glare and for the Grove, possibly. He could draw land next turn. Yeah, Scott's plan might just be use the Twilight Drover, keep things under control, until he can activate Grove of the Guardian, and maybe populate it. So he does cast the Twilight Drover. Leaves that mana to cast Sundering Growth if he wants to. So Twilight Drover gets a counter whenever a non-token, or sorry, whenever a token leaves the battlefield. You see, he currently has no tokens. And then you can, once it gets a counter, you can pay 3, remove it, and make 2 spirits. So it's good once it gets going. Right, so Detention Sphere, I assume, has to target Glare. That's probably going to lead to some tapping in response to tap these 2 guys. That'd be my guess. Oh no, it targets a Twilight Drover. Interesting. Well, why didn't he tap it in response? Because he's just going to Sundering Growth it now. Ken Smith, he can't repeal it. He doesn't have enough mana, and you can't rip your own permanents. So yeah, this is going to resolve. Twilight Drover is going to come back. It's going to tap 5 of the 7 power on the other side. And he will take 2 damage. And then he will hope to draw land. Although, we know that there's a Cyclonic Rift and a repeal, so the Grove of the Guardian's actually does not have much of a future. Although, it would put a counter on the Twilight Drover and possibly let him make some spirits. So, there's that. Pretty slow, grindy kind of matchup. Alright, so this looks like a second main Azorius Charm. Did the Charm draw a card? I think these 3 were already there. The planes got bounced. I'm not sure what the Charm did. I don't think it gave lifelink. Sorry, I think I missed that. Ready and Willing is the draw. So you can give your guys lifelink and Death Touch, or you can make them indestructible and untap them, or both. That actually could be pretty powerful here. You get a tap, then untap, and then ambush, although there's a bunch of instants on the other side. Probably going to make that hard to actually pull off. It just feels like this token strategy just gets very easily disrupted by all the bounce effects. as the bounce effects are likely at their best in this matchup, actually. Smith hits his 6th mana source, so he can cast the Angelic Skirmisher if he wants to. Oh, actually, that was it was his 7th, but he didn't have double white yet. He's got 2 bounce lands, so he has 7 total mana. He could also Cyclonic Rift and attack for, I guess, only 2. Yeah, he probably wants to wait on that. He might just cast the Skirmisher, I think. There's the Skirmisher. So he can choose First Strike, Vigilance, or Lifelink. Knowing he's probably only getting in for 2, I think he's just going to choose Lifelink. It would make the most sense to me, I think. So Scott is, I think he allowed, he didn't use the glare at all, and now he's casting. See, I think you'd use the glare to tap 2 of them, and then let the other 2 attack, and then use ready to untap and then block. I'm assuming that's essentially what he's doing anyway, but this way you don't take 3 damage. So the blocks do happen. This is one time couldn't get those bounce spells off. So that actually turns out pretty decently for Scott, although he does take 3 damage. Oh, and he draws Abzan Ghost Council, which he can cast. Pillar Makes Black. That's a strong card. It's also hard to interact with. This is going to put Scott up to 12 and Smith down to 16. He can also use the glare aggressively. Like, he knows if he's going to exile this, he might as well tap this and get in for damage, if that's something he's interested in doing. Alright, so he didn't do that. It looks like he's just leaving it in play. So he's just going to leave it there to block with, which I don't think makes a lot of sense because it doesn't have flying. Smith draws Arrest. That's not a particularly good one, actually. At least not against Abzan, since it can just exile itself and come back. Oh, but Cyclonic Rift is going to do work here. Yeah. So now he probably really wishes he had exiled it. Because then he would at least get Abzan back without paying mana for it. He is going to get to glare down these 2 creatures, but he could have done that anyway. So this is all non-land permanents, right? So it's going to bounce a Leyline and the glare too. He only has 5 mana. That's brutal. This card is very powerful. You saw quite a bit of play in Standard in Mono Blue Devotion. It's a very potent card for them to cast late in the game when they've established a board presence. Ogre Slumlord's a draw. So you can cast Drover Voice. That may actually just be the best. He could get 2 things. Oh no, he doesn't have Glare in play. How on earth is he going to win from here? Maybe just cast the Abzan and exile it so you have more threats. So you'll have that plus threats next turn? I'm not even sure. This seems like a pretty tough position. Yeah, I'm not actually sure what he should do here. He's going to go with playing 2 spells, which can't really argue with. But it's a lot worse when you can't use the Glare Subdual. He's just going to take 7. Doesn't seem great at all. Renounce the guilds as the drought. We talked about this in the sideboarding. Cyclonic Rift's the backbreaker. Smith, I think, has constructed a very good deck. He has early game elements that you have to care about, and then makes you spend time and effort dealing with that, and then once you stabilize, there's suddenly this couple of these huge game enders. Between Aetherling, Angel of Serenity, and Cyclonic Rift. It seems to be a pretty potent combination. He's, I think, about to move to 3-0. I'd say he's casting Glare of Subdual. This would make him not die, but Smith's probably just going to repeal it on the end step and not care about that token. And that, I think, will be the game. He does have to worry about, so that is an aggressive line. Like, obviously, if you repeal the Glare and then give your opponent a free token and then you don't win, but there's not a ton of things that that Scott could have, really, as far as I can tell. And nope, that's the game. Scott concedes. Smith wins 2-0. And he moves to a place where he's pretty familiar with from our last season, alone in first place. And that's going to be the game. Try to get these guys in video chat. So that didn't work out. Oh, they have their own call. My bad.
Green, what?
There we go.
Green, red, or red, black aggro.
Green, red, or red, black.
I think it's just because they're cheap decks online.
Yeah.
Hello, hello.
Hello.
Hey?
So I think the main thing that became apparent to me when doing the commentary is just that the tokens just I think don't line up too well with bounce.
No, not even in the slightest.
It seemed like it was definitely an uphill battle.
Yeah. I also played horribly.
Yeah, I thought you had a few missteps. I thought game one your draw matched up terribly, and then game two, I think you didn't help yourself a couple of times.
Yeah.
Cyclonic Rift is brutal. Every time that card gets cast, the game just adds.
It's quite hard to beat that card.
Yeah. What how'd you guys end up sideboarding? I came up with a few different things that I wasn't sure how it actually played out though.
What was that?
How'd you guys sideboard?
What's our sideboard?
I brought out some of my little guys and brought in a couple pieces counter magic, renounce the guilds, and the extra bounce spell.
Yeah, it seemed like Renounce had a lot of targets.
I just wanted something that could deal with an enchantment if I had to, or try to deal with one.
Uh-huh.
I brought in Glare. Life Force, Luxon Hierarch, Smiter,
Uh-huh.
Ghost Council,
Okay. Yeah,
and Thundering Growth.
talked about some of that stuff. There was I think Lair is just really good.
Yeah.
Like you can generate a very asymmetric effect with it if you're making enough tokens.
Yeah.
But
If I'm making the tokens, that is.
it seemed hard to put enough tokens into play, but even with fairly limited creatures and stuff, it still seemed pretty good in that game.
Yeah. They let me stay alive as long as I did.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. It seemed like some of those cards, like Golgari Germination game one, just never did anything
No, it didn't.
because things don't die.
Yeah.
Did you guys come up with anything else? I mean, I would have. It really hurt you not exiling Abzan and then getting everything bounced.
Yeah.
Because you could have at least rebuilt much faster.
I mean, he would have shocked for another 2, but I think that, well, I could have played Glare instead of those 2 creatures and softened the blow a little bit, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he would have been in play. You don't have to recast him.
Right.
Right.
It's tough to come back from that.
Yeah.
Seems like a fundamentally good strategy.
Yeah, I think the Rift kind of just sealed the game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
there wasn't much left in my hand.
Uh-huh.
I was also just off a mana for, not that it would have mattered, but for Grove.
Oh, right.
I was really, for some reason, I thought you had enough mana one turn to do that, so I held up the repeal instead of bouncing everything.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, no, I didn't have it for a while. Because it's 6 mana, technically.
Right.
Yeah.
If you count. Yeah, the land you sack doesn't count towards the 5 mana.
Right.
Do you have any I feel like I've played my deck 3 times now. I feel like I kind of understand what's good and what's bad about it and stuff. Do you guys feel like you kind of know your decks now? You're more comfortable with them, or
That was the first time that the Skymark, the 3/3 that bounces things, was actually good. It's
yeah.
been terrible.
All right. Yeah, it's good when you're ahead, but it's kind of mediocre when you're not.
It's also good against little tokens.
Right. The card also was I don't want to spoil it for when you watch the video later, but the source of I think probably the worst joke in the history of my commentary. So
Okay.
I'll leave it at that. But yeah, it's late on a weeknight, so I think we're gonna call it here unless you have anything else you want to say or talk
I'm
about.
good.
Okay. Well, it was fun, and we will hopefully. It seems like we keep running into delays with people, but hopefully we'll get going again this weekend
Yeah.
with more matches.
You, this is what